أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم من همزه ونفخه في بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We're gonna go ahead and start with check-ins, inshallah. Today, it's a simple one. Or is it? What do you think? So let's continue with this, inshallah. And same thing over here. What is depression? And what are some potential causes and preventative measures? Now, again, focus on what could be leading up to that. Now, again, I want to make a like a note over here as before. That is that the causes of depression, they've the people that are working on this stuff, they've found some that seem to be potential causes, but they haven't been able to sort of like come up with a step-by-step process of like, okay, this is happening, this is what happens, this is what happens, and so therefore they haven't been able to actually find like cures, at least in the Western world, right, for depression. So in the scientific community, let's say, right, when I say Western world over here, I mean to say the scientific community. In the Eastern community, at least among the various traditions and religions and so on, they have they've sort of like come to understand how to like navigate these contexts, and people actually do recover and do better and stuff like that because of that. But certain perceptions and things like that, otherwise can certain there are certain things that like Eastern societies were more built on, but in Western societies, when they started sort of like resetting the button and trying to build everything from scratch, that we're not going to accept anything unless we have like confirmation for it or something like that, as opposed to sort of like taking what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set down, and not needing to prove it, right? Because nowadays everything needs to be like proven and stuff. So what happens is we really are like resetting the clock to the human experience essentially, whereas other countries, other traditions and stuff have found ways to navigate certain things. We have sort of not, we're sort of ignoring that and saying, well, let's start from scratch. And I think this happened more in the 1900s, late 1800s and in the 1900s, because before that, religion was actually playing a big role in many places and stuff, right? Of course, it had, Christianity had negative dynamics in the sense of like how it was being implemented and like how it was being, exploited and stuff, right? Or how people are using that to exploit others and stuff. But like besides that, as a concept, like even in in the educational systems in Japan and China right now, they actually focus on morality and like being nice and character development and stuff like that a lot more than they teach other electives and stuff like that. So they might not have as like they might not have as broad of an education as let's say the Western countries, but they do actually emphasize a lot more on character development and things like that. And so that's something that just to keep in mind over there. Some refreshers over here just to keep that in your mind. Anytime you go into transformation mode, remember this. Just like the conversation we just had about like how to have the mindset, if you know what you want at the end and you know where you stand currently, then you can sort of like do the practice, which is step 3 and 4, right? Kind of what are the the incremental changes that you want, but also what are the sort of the mindsets and stuff, what are the different routines that you might have daily, what are the things that you want to think about, what are the notes that you want to go back to every time you're about to start practicing or something like that. So those are steps 3 and 4. And then there's this, the growth mindset, again, all about transformation, and we said sustainable transformation because we want to make sure it's not like short term. So these are things to keep in mind. So that activity that or the stuff we were talking about earlier, the mindset change, keeping this in mind is going to be useful. And remember, discipline is focusing on discipline is focusing on making sure that you're assessing yourself relative to those steps that we were talking about. Are we moving forward? Are we making progress? Are we using effective techniques to make sure that we can practice and actually move forward, or are we not doing all those things? So that's what discipline is about. So constant evaluation relative to your the end vision that you have in mind, right? Relative to that, you can figure out how much are you moving forward or not, and you can also measure yourself relative to the goals that you're trying to achieve, which are like the checkpoints along the way. How far are you from a checkpoint? And then there's also these roadblocks and so on to keep in mind. Unrealistic expectations. You should be like, people having fixed mindsets instead of fluid mindset. We talked about perceptions, right? What happens if I don't do a certain way? All the harm that I can have, all the guilt that I might feel and stuff. So that's the fear of failure. Like, what is that going to lead to? What are the consequences of things not happening the my way? What are the consequences of me trying something and then it not working out, and then somebody might get harmed and stuff like that. So sometimes we sort of end up feeling like we need to have that control, we need to own it and stuff, when we can sort of say, wait, let me take a step back. So keeping that in mind. And then this is another thing that people have issues with. They don't have an ultimate purpose, so they just don't know what they're here for. Like, what are they supposed to do, right? If I don't have a purpose in life, I cannot actually come up with a plan on what I want to do in life, right? Because I don't know if I'm actually going towards a purpose or not. If I don't have an end goal, an end vision, I cannot move forward. So if somebody tells you, for example, in a society that you can do whatever it is that you want to do, right? You don't have a purpose. You're not gonna have, but there's no hereafter and stuff like that, and that's it. So then in that case, a person is sitting there, they're seeing everyone trying to compete for, they're competing in the rat race, climbing the ladders and stuff, right? But they don't actually see the end goal. Like, what is the end? If I get $1 billion, right, what's the end of that? Should I go for $2 billion? But if I get to 2 billion, do I get to 3 billion? What does the success look like, right? What is my purpose? And if I am working, for example, as a humanitarian worker or whatever, okay, what's the end of that? Like, does that mean, when everyone is happy and they get their, everyone gets their food, for example, everyone in the world has access to food, then there's what's the end of that? Like, what do I do after that? After that is done, right? So when we don't have purpose, right, then it makes it very overwhelming for us, because we're confused. Because on the one hand, we're expected to do certain things, to keep pushing forward, to keep climbing the ladder, but on the other hand, we don't know what the ladder is ultimately leading to, and nobody knows that around us and stuff, and everyone's just blindly going after something, but they don't have anything that they're going towards, right? So that actually poses a lot of obstacles and stuff, and it can lead to depression and anxiety and things like that, because it's meaningless. Essentially everything you're doing is purposeless and meaningless. So why should I do it? And why is everyone making me do it if it's not going to have any meaning at the end of the day? Notice a lot of these things can go into what we just talked about. A lot of them. What is the end goal? And how do we, and why do people end up going through certain difficulties and stuff like that, right? And how to avoid them and how to fix them, address them. Okay, so with that, let us go through here. If we run out of time, let me know. We can we don't have to watch all of them, but let's get started with it. At least a few of them, inshallah. So pick one.
Bottom left.
Bottom left. All right. So as we start this, I just want you guys to remember that these are non-Muslims. There's a lot of still theory-related stuff here. Theory meaning they don't actually have confirmation. They don't have a lot of details that we have from an Islamic perspective. So they have a lot of theories in mind, as in they've read things and stuff. They've been sort of sharing ideas from each other and stuff. But this is a concept of starting from scratch, right? Somebody comes researches something, and they come up with certain pieces of truth that might be relevant in that particular situation, but may not be generalizable. Then another person does something and stuff, and they try to share results and stuff, and then but they're still, all of them are still looking for the unknown truth, right? It's this, imagine if the black screen right here, the screen is black, right? But let's say they were able to identify this X over here. and they were able to identify this stuff, right? But what does the bigger picture look like? What does the rest of the screen have on there, right? We're not gonna know until we like scratch off, everything behind it and stuff. So to actually know what this is actually saying, what if there's something, before the ready, set, grow? What if something right before that, right? What if there's something hidden there that we don't see yet, and that might actually change our understanding of reality once we find it? So imagine like a lot of these people are sort of like just focusing on these things and trying to understand what the entire picture is talking about based on whatever limited like exposed stuff that they have, the colored areas or the white area, right? They're trying to figure out what's behind the black area. They're trying to make sense of it in the grand scheme of things and stuff. Like in this case, you notice there's a tree right here, but the X is sort of like exposing that tree somehow, right? And maybe if we can like remove the rest of the layer, you might actually be able to see the full tree. So like what's on the tree? Is there an apple there? Is there like like a nest over there of a bird? What's there, right? And what is on the other side? Is there like on the left side to the top? Is there like a sun that you see, or whatever? Or maybe there's other trees nearby, or maybe there's water nearby and stuff, right? Well, we don't know that. So based on whatever they know or whatever they can see, right? They're trying to make sense of how everything else looks, but also why does everything look like that? Why is this tree right here? Why is the tree, with the way, the shape it is and stuff? So keep that in mind as we watch this video, inshallah. So, like Muhammad was saying earlier, don't take anything for granted. Don't assume that everything that's being said and stuff is definitely true. Just keep that in mind, that this is something that, we're just going through. They're trying to figure out things and stuff. But there are things that we can understand that also align with what we know from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they're compatible, meaning like they're not refuted by Sharia. So there are things that are not refuted by Sharia, and they might be accommodable then in that sense. So keep that in mind.
I'm going to tell you a story. It's a short one, I promise. What I want you to do is I want you to picture in your mind as I tell it, okay? Bob went to the beach to play fetch with his dog. That's it. I told you it was short. But here's my question for you. When you picture it in your mind, what kind of dog did Bob have? Now, what the research says is you probably pictured one of three dogs. Either one, you pictured your dog. Two, you pictured a Labrador Retriever. Or three, you pictured a Golden Retriever. And the reality is, that kind of makes sense, right? Maybe you pictured your dog because, well, when you think dog, that's the reference point you have for dog. But the research says if you didn't picture yours, you probably pictured a Labrador Retriever or a Golden Retriever. Why? Well, kind of makes sense because I told you that he went to the beach to play fetch with his dog. And what do Labrador Retrievers do? What do Golden Retrievers do? It's right there in the name. They retrieve things. So if he went to play fetch, that's what he brought. There's a concept in rhetorical studies called linguistic or listening fidelity. And what listening fidelity is how close did I give my message to what you pictured in your head? Now, you pictured a Golden Retriever. Bob doesn't have a Golden Retriever. No, Bob has a mixed breed. It's half wolf, half chihuahua. It's a wolf wawa. That's what he's got. But you didn't picture that. No, you didn't. There's a gap between what you pictured and what he's got. There's a gap between perception and between reality. I first started thinking about the gap and this idea of a gap when I spent time in London. I went to the London Underground, which is just the fancy European way of saying subway, and I saw signs everywhere. They reminded me to mind the gap. Now here they're talking about the platform of the train. There's a little spot there, and they don't want you to twist your ankle or anything, which is smart. I think that there's a lot of good advice that we had in train stations. In Japan, for example, you might see a sign that says "Take care of head," and that's smart. That's not what we're talking about right now. No, what we're talking about now is the gap. You should mind the gap, because between perception and between reality, there's a gap. Those gaps can be dangerous. Might twist an ankle. Might do more harm. Might hurt someone else. So let's talk for a minute about the dangers of the gap and maybe what we can do to overcome those dangers. There's a South Asian parable that you might have heard before. It's where a series of blind men are able to get experience to an elephant. They've never experienced an elephant before, and they're asked to describe what an elephant is. But each one of the men is only allowed a certain part to the elephant. So one of the blind men touches the side of the elephant, right? He's like, oh, I know what an elephant is like. It's like a wall. Another gets access to the leg. He's like, no. Elephant is like a pillar. Or the tail says, no, it's like a rope. Or the tusk, it's a pipe. And the point, of course, here is that none of the blind men by themselves really understand what an elephant is, because they only have kind of a limited perspective. They have limited access to what the elephant is. There's a gap. There's a gap between perception and between reality. And in rhetorical studies, again, there are theorists who talk about this gap between perception and between reality. And what they say is that we all experience the gap, because when we're born, we are born into a culture, to a series of cultural narratives, or master narratives. So theorists like Kenneth Burke, or theorists like Edwin Black, say that when we are born into stories that precede us, these giant master narratives, that we take these cultural narratives, this rhetoric of narrative, and we then spin out our own personal stories through it. And your personal stories oftentimes are reflective of the master narratives that you were born into. Althusser says that we are hailed by ideology. That again is the perception that you're born into, which then is separate and distinct from reality. And what do we have to do? Well, we must always mind the gap. Virtually every discipline talks about the gap. In one way or another, they all see it, they all perceive it, they all know it's there. Even in the hard sciences of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, we can know one thing without having to know another. There's a gap in what we have access to and what we can know. In rhetorical studies, it's the master narrative versus your personal stories. All those things, they're also very, very careful that we have to be able to mind the gap. But that doesn't always sit really well with me. Because if we mind the gap, and we are aware there's a difference between perception and between reality, it seems to suggest that we can have access at some point to reality. So in some versions of that South Asian parable, there's another man who walks up and says, here's what the elephant looks like, and describes for each of the men, here is what the elephant looks like in its totality. Of course, the man who walks up is deaf, so he'll never hear the elephant bellow. Can't have access to reality. So I don't like this idea of minding the gap. Rather, I want to do something different. I want to mine the gap. Because I think there's something there that we can get out of the gap that can help us avoid that danger. And it's going to sound silly, and it's going to sound absurd, but I also think it'll work. What can we do to mine the gap as opposed to mind the gap?
Notice the difference between mind with a D and mine with an E.
One of my favorite films is from 1993. It's a film called Falling Down. It stars Michael Douglas and Robert Duvall. And in it, Michael Douglas is a man who rails against what he believes to be the absurd. So ultimately what happens is he goes into a fast food restaurant and wants to get breakfast, and it's 10:35. Oh yeah, you see where this is going. It's 10:35. And he wants breakfast, but they stop serving at 10:30. And they say, I'm sorry, they can't. And he says, but I can see right there you have breakfast still under the heat lamps. Just serve me that. And they say, we can't, it's against the rules. So what happens in the film, it's kind of a sad tale actually, is he has a break and he snaps and he begins railing against the absurd. He begins railing against what he believes to be the reality as it exists. But what he's really railing against is his own perception. And that's the danger of the gap, which is that if you believe that you have access to reality, at some point you think you can get a monopoly on truth. Now I said that from these master narratives, you spin out your own personal stories, and you do. But when those personal stories you believe to be the only representation of reality, in my own personal story, in my own personal movie, I'm always the hero. And if my perception of reality is different from yours, and I'm the hero, then you've got to be the villain. And if you're the villain, then I fight against you. The difference between perception and between reality, if my perception is different from yours and I'm right, then you're wrong. But in Falling Down, at the very end of the film, spoiler alert, at the very end of the film, Michael Douglas is standing there, and Robert Duvall is a cop who's been chasing him the whole time. He has a gun pointed at him, and Michael Douglas has this revelation. He says, wait, I'm the bad guy? Yeah. We don't ever kind of come to that realization because we're always the hero, because we think we have a monopoly on truth, because we think that we know what reality is. So how do we mine the gap to avoid that from happening, from kind of hardening into that nodal point where we have reality and we alone have it? Be absurd. Instead of Michael Douglas railing against what he perceives to be absurd, I want you to embrace the absurd. Listening fidelity. The wolf wawa. You pictured a dog that was not a wolf wawa. You know what you didn't picture? I know you didn't picture this. You didn't picture a dump truck. I think maybe you kind of should. So let's do my story again. And this time I want you to not picture a dog. I want you to picture, I'm still going to say dog. I want you to picture a dump truck. We got it? Bob went to the beach to play fetch with his dog. Now, you pictured a dump truck at the beach. It's absurd. But the reality is this, that dump truck is just a placeholder. Just like the golden retriever you pictured was just a placeholder, the dump truck is just a placeholder. So you still got the context of the story. You still understand, we're still communicating. You still understand what I'm trying to say. The difference is that there is this glaring point in your mind that is absurd, that is a constant reminder to you that you are only seeing the world through your individual perceptions, because that's all we're ever able to do. And when there's a constant reminder that all I'm doing is perceiving the world my way, not the real way, just my way, then I can have empathy for others. I still don't have access to reality because none of us ever do, but I'm more empathetic. There's a gap between perception and reality.
So obviously here, the note over here is that in some cases we don't have access to reality. In some cases we do have access to reality as Muslims, right? So just keep that in mind over here. But I think what he's really focusing on over here is the aspect of empathy, where we don't actually understand what's actually going deep inside, what's actually going on deep inside the person's heart, for example, in their minds and stuff, right? We cannot understand that. We don't understand the feelings that they might be feeling. We don't understand what their reality looks like, what their small lowercase c truth looks like, right? And again, it could be based on whatever narratives that they have and stuff, whatever the mindset they have, whatever pieces of information that they sort of like accepted as true and so on, and that they built their reality on, or built their perspectives on. But just keep that in mind, there is a little bit of a difference.
Reality. But there's something very, very special in the middle, in that gap. There's also a pretty big gap between a wolf and a chihuahua. But when those two things come together, something special can happen too. That's what I want for you. Embrace the absurd. Be the wolf wawa. Thank you.
So, by the way, I did see the message. 15 minutes. Okay. What's the next one?
Bottom right.
Bottom right. Power perception. This is a little bit of a longer one. It is a skit, sort of, but it also has a point in there. So just keep in mind that he is trying to make a presentation regarding that. So he is.
In our world today, we've been trained.
He is one of those people that like really focuses on. So he's giving like idea of perception, but he's also getting he's gonna he's okay. I'll let you just kind of watch it, but it's funny.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. How you doing out there, Oakland? All right. You miss me yet? Well, now, let's look at this audience. They're inquisitive, intelligent, and very attractive, might I add. You remind me a lot of myself. I said that being president was the greatest honor of my lifetime. But that was until today. Giving this TEDx talk is the biggest honor of my lifetime. So check that off the old bucket list. I'm humbled and honored to share the stage with so many talented performers and speakers here today. On this historic day, just 2 days away from my all-time favorite day, Taco Tuesday. This guy knows what I'm talking about. I'm glad I can make it here today. You may have seen on the news that the family and I just returned from a nice relaxing vacation in my home state, where I was born, Hawaii, or, as Donald Trump pronounces it, Kenya. Now, although the last election didn't necessarily turn out the way I hoped, I think it's a beautiful thing that children growing up this day and age can now see that the president of the United States can be a man or a woman, black, white, or orange. For generations, the United States has served as a bastion of freedom for those fleeing injustice and persecution. The Statue of Liberty has long shown as a beacon of hope to millions of immigrants arriving that you've made it, and you can now achieve your own version of the American dream. Just this morning, Donald Trump announced his new immigration policy. He said he's simply going to place a new sign on top of the Statue of Liberty that reads, "You can keep your tired and your poor, we're good." Now, under my administration, we created over 16 million jobs in the private sector. We saw a boom in small businesses. Unemployment rates were the lowest they've been in a decade. And for the first time in history, 75% of the people in the United States made up 3/4 of our domestic population. That was a math joke. I thought you folks would get that one. But the housing market was healing. Foreclosures were down. And it was easier than ever for millennials to move back in with their folks. I was brokering peace deals with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, and North Korean Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un, or as we refer to them in the Situation Room, 2.5 men. I really like that joke. Look at how cute that little guy is. He's making his little threats. Just want to give him a little wedgie, But, unfortunately, this day and age, we see the Second Amendment in the news frequently about gun control and gun rights. Right now, we have to produce more ID to buy alcohol than you do to buy a gun in America. That's why before I left office, I issued an executive order that you cannot buy a gun without a six-pack. But Congress shot that one down. Folks, today I came to talk to you about two things, perception and image. Now, before I get to that, I just want to get a little comfortable here. Excuse me. Let's take these babies off. That's better. Hey, everybody. I'm Reggie Brown. I'm an actor, comedian, keynote speaker, and, of course, Barack Obama impersonator. Thank you. And while I usually travel around the country and the world sharing with audiences my story about how I became the president of the United States, it's how this little guy here became this guy. And both of those are me. But today I want to talk about perception and image because I think it's more important now than ever before that we are able to see the truth being bombarded with all of this information and misinformation, all of the reality shows that don't depict real reality, these competitions that are making us compete with each other instead of supporting each other, these internet bots and these alternate facts. But before I get to that, I want you guys to watch this video so I can go slip into something a little more comfortable backstage, take this makeup off so you can see me for who I truly am. So please enjoy a snippet of my video, Healthy. It's got a little upbeat, you're going to recognize the track, and has a few good lyrics too, so enjoy, I'll be right back. Get outside, today's a gorgeous day. So many things to do, now get out of bed. If you feel like it's healthy, it's for you. Run around the block 10 times, you will feel brand new. I take steps I don't want to tell. Oh, and you don't get something great. Because, first of all, how many people... I hope you guys talk a little bit about perception and image, because, first of all, how many people when I first hit the stage thought that I really was President Obama coming up? Perfect. That's a great range ratio. And I have no idea what I look like right now, just to let you guys know. That was the quickest makeup move I've ever done. So I might look a little weird. But so for the past 8 years, I've been very fortunate to travel around the world being paid by some of the top companies and corporations to do what I did here today, to fool people by presenting a false image to them, to throw off their perception. But when you saw me come out, you felt something not only in your body, but in your mind and in your emotions that connected with what you saw to how you feel about President Obama. And that happens to me all the time. And this is basically what everybody wants after I'm done performing the Obama selfie. And sorry I'm out of makeup already, but everyone here could have gotten one today. But it's very valuable for a lot of people who like to fool their friends. I travel over doing that. I'm also paid to entertain people who have entertained us. This is me and Tom Hanks a few years ago after I roasted Les Moonves and honored his wife Rita Wilson. I've also played Obama on some of our favorite television shows. This was me on Hannah Montana, me in Barbershop 3, if anyone's seen that. I was the Obama in the end. Nobody really knows that. I played, this is me and Brad Pitt behind the scenes of War Machine shot in London. This is me at the Republican Leadership Conference in 2011. This is me getting kicked off stage at the Republican Leadership Conference in 2011. Oh yeah, that was awesome. And I've been able to travel to over 20 countries around the world. 21 if you consider the U.S. Virgin Islands a separate country like Trump does. But this is taken with the crew in Tokyo, and I've been able to meet amazing, amazing people around the world. It's one of the best parts of my job. This is from Obama Guns Now. Got over 100 million hits in the first few months, 30 million alone in China the first week by altering people's perception based on the image I was pushing out. I've performed with real-life political figures and real-life political impersonators like this Kim Jong-un, my friend Howard. But I'm starting to run short on time, so I got to stick to it here. But I'm hired by your average Joes in your plain Janes, by the U.S. military, special forces, people on their deathbeds that want to meet the president before they die, millionaires and billionaires like my friend John Paulson. But it's people like this that make my job worthwhile. And I don't remember this woman's name, but someone once said that it's not remembering someone's name that matters; it's remembering the way they make you feel. And this woman, when she saw me, knocked over her purse, spilled all over the ground, and this hug lasted for about 3 minutes. As she sobbed on my shoulder and told me how much I meant to her, her family, and the direction of the world. And I know that she wasn't talking to me; she was talking to President Obama, the image that I presented to her. And that happens a lot. The good and the bad. Unfortunately, not everyone feels the same way I do about President Obama, and I hear about it, trust me. But I don't mean to alarm you, but I want to tell you something that I think needs to be addressed, and that is, you are being judged. I'm being judged. It's something that we constantly do to ourselves on a daily basis, and we need to be aware that things are not always what they seem. It's the proverbial tip of the iceberg, but I wanted you to experience that feeling today, to see how strongly your body, your mind, and your emotions can tell you something's true, and in the end, it may not be that way. So dig deeper and don't just look at the surface of things. Look beyond that, because right now we're being bombarded with commercialism and marketing, all these things they want us to seem important in our lives. But as a few of the other speakers said here today, these human connections that we have are the most important things that we can have in our lives. Money is man-made. Cars and clothes and all these things are. I saw some of the happiest people I've ever seen 2 months ago when I was doing a promotional tour in India. These kids were running around like it was the best day of their lives. They were butt naked, covered in dirt. There were pigs and cows and everything in the street. They had no idea what they were missing out on because they were just enjoying the true essence of life. Carefree, I wish I could be like that. I mean, I get treated differently when I walk around looking like this, like I do on a daily basis, to when I look like this. And it even happened backstage. I've been here all day. And until I became Obama a few minutes ago, no one wanted a picture with me. I was just walking by. Oh, looking forward to later, man. Looking forward to seeing you. And then once I become the president, everyone wants to be close. They want the picture. They want to fool people. And that makes me sad. What about me, man? It really doesn't make me sad. It did at a certain point, but I'm over it now. But I just want to touch on a couple other things before I go. And it's what you think becomes your reality. And that is true in so many senses of this simple statement. If you think about life in a positive way, don't be afraid of your next day, the next challenge. Always go with a positive attitude. You will typically have a positive outcome. Real quick, how many people have taken a picture and then judged yourself and said, oh, I look out of shape, I'm ugly, I look stupid wearing this? Could you just raise your hand? Because I think it's pretty much everyone here. Well, I have a picture like that too, and I want to show it to you right now for 2 reasons. Boom. This is me when I was around 20 years old and I was modeling. I was so confused. I had no idea who I was on the inside. I was trying to show everyone I'm cool and look at me, I'm in good shape. I had no idea about who I was or what mattered. And I thought I was out of shape in this picture, and I wasn't even skinny enough to do some jobs looking like this. And now I look back at this picture, and I'll never look like that again. And that's why I wanted to show it to you guys. I think I look alright in this picture, but I didn't think so back then. So just think about how often we do that to ourselves and to each other. We put each other down instead of building each other up, and now more than ever, it's so important to be there for the person next to you. Don't compete. Don't bring them down to a place of comfort for you. Let's build each other up and help each other achieve the excellent person that we're here to be. And before I go, I want to leave you with something that was said by someone who was very, very important to me in my development in life, and that was Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he said that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I really want you guys to take that. Look.
So this is important. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So the perception is so powerful over here, and that perception can also be self-controlled essentially. Like we could be the ones that actually put in our mind certain things that then end up making us perceive things a certain way.
Look him up because he was a master to me. But yes, please be the best person you can be, live the best life, and treat each other with kindness and respect. Thank you very much.
Okay, so that was making sure that the way you look at things, understanding the concept of the way you look at things can have an impact about how you or the way that you perceive, the way you look at things, or let's say that the rules that you put in your head then determine how you look at things. And if you change those, then what you see ends up changing too. Not in the sense that it changes in reality, but what happens is your perception of that thing changes. So that's an important aspect of here. Okay, what's next? We have 2 more.
Top right.
Top right.
Shipped with delivery done.
Oh, Johnny, you don't listen. I told you to pick up all these toys an hour ago. What happened? Weren't you supposed to get your report card today? Come on, hand it over. Let me see. can be our honor student. Johnny, aren't you home late today? Where were you? Detention? Again? This is the third time. Oh my God, you're so stupid. You don't listen. Oh, you're gonna get detention again and again and again and then get suspended? Well, where's your father? Michael, come down here. You have a disappointing son. So we all heard these phrases sometimes, and they can be pretty funny, but we know that the work we say can make an impact on others. So throughout my 4 years, I've had a lot of opportunities to get involved in research and become a research assistant in different labs. And before starting any research of my own, I mainly helped grad students and seniors collect data for their experiments. And usually this involved experimenting on little kids, which is a lot of fun. So parents would come with their child, and they'd come into the lab, they'd watch me administer the experiment, and in the end, they'd ask me a question. They'd say, oh, well, how did they do?
Can you play it at a lower speed?
The worst question.
What was that?
I'm having a hard time understanding her. It's a bit too fast.
Let's try this.
Grad students and seniors collect data for their experiments. And usually this involved experimenting on little kids, which is a lot of fun. So parents would come with their child, and they'd come into the lab, they'd watch me administer the experiment, and in the end, they'd ask me a question. They'd say, oh, well, how did they do? Or they'd say, oh, you know, they would have done better if they were at home. The worst question was, how do I make this smarter? They did so horrible. What should I do? I think, oh, no, not this question again. But I would always have the same answer. I'd say, oh, they did so great. They're so hardworking. Why? Because their child is standing right beside them. And what I said could impact the way that that child perceived themselves. And maybe what I said could impact the way that that parent perceived their child. So I was first introduced to the term locus of control one summer when I was doing research with Dr. Stephen Wiki. He has dedicated a great portion of his career talking about locus of control. Locus of control is the degree to which people believe that they can control the outcomes of events in their lives. So how much you believe that you can control your life. And locus of control is abbreviated as LOC. Now, this isn't about bugs, locusts of control. It's locus as in a point or position on a spectrum. So before I continue, I'll demonstrate. So how many of you have seen the water bottle flipping trend on the internet? Now, if you haven't, it's okay. It's really simple. Basically, you try to flip a water bottle and make it land upright. So this might take me a few tries, forgive me, but I'll try my best. Okay, let's see. Okay, whoa, thank you. Okay, so that was exciting. So this wasn't an April Fool's joke. This wasn't something that was for no reason. I have a question to ask you guys. Do you think I was able to do this because of luck or because I practiced beforehand? So how many think luck? And how many think I practiced beforehand? Okay, great. So if you thought that I was able to do this because I practiced beforehand, you would get a point towards internal on our scale because you believe that I had control over the situation. I practiced and I was able to do this. If you answered luck, you would get a point towards external on our scale because you believe that outside forces, other things, chance impacted this outcome. Overall, when you take a full locus of control questionnaire, if you answer more points internally, you are internal, or you think you can control most things in your life. And if you get more points towards external, you think other people, other things, powerful others, chance impacts most of your life. Now, what do I think? I'm very internal. I know that what I do can affect my outcome, so I practiced this as much as I could before coming here. I looked up how to do this, figured out a way that this would work for me, figured out little hacks and tips. So I picked a water bottle with a big surface area at the bottom. I figured out how much water to fill, only 1/3 of the way. I kind of figured out when to release. I just practiced this, annoyed my roommate. Yeah, the whole works. So overall, is it more beneficial to be internal or external overall? Studies show internal. Now, before any of you get upset because you pick luck in this situation, don't worry. This is just one question, and you have to take a full locus of control questionnaire to figure out if you're more internal or external. If you take the full questionnaire, it takes many factors into account. Also, you want to remember that locus of control is measured on a continuum. So scoring exclusively internal or external is very rare, and you don't want to really score exclusively internal. Thinking more externally can help in situations where being too internal.
Remember, she's talking about how people tend to be, right? It is somewhat disconnected from the discussion of how much should we be, right? So just keep that in mind. There's a difference between the two. One of them, like from an Islamic perspective, there are certain things we just say, okay, you know, we have certain things that we're accountable for, and we don't have control over. We have control over and we're accountable for. And then there's things that we don't have control over and we're not accountable for those things. And so we don't need to have that kind of like feeling that, you know, we need to have control in those situations. So Islam kind of gives parameters, but in this case, it's kind of giving you an understanding of how, you know, the science is right now. But also kind of, I'm adding this commentary over here so you understand some places where things can go off like they can go off track, and as a result can impact how people function in societies and so on. So Islamic perspective sort of bounds certain things, and then kind of gives us certain things that we don't need to feel guilty about, and then also at the same time gives us certain things that we have, you know, control over and so on, and has like expectations based on those things. But for, you know, from this perspective over here, the discussion is sort of like what people end up tending to do.
Would be inappropriate. So for example, if you put out your recycling and it was never picked up by your waste management company, that wouldn't be your fault, right? But if you were too internal and you blamed yourself and you thought you can control everything, then you'd be thinking too internally and thinking more externally and realizing that other things impacted your situation would be beneficial. Now, if you put your recycling out on the wrong day, but you blame the company for not picking it up, then you'd be thinking too externally. You wouldn't realize that you were to blame. You were the cause of the problem. So why was I interested in this? What initially attracted me to this? So I'll give you an example. Say there are two students in the classroom, and one is internal and one is external, but they both failed their exam. If you ask them, why did you fail your exam? The internal student would say that this was because they didn't study hard enough, and that's why they didn't do really well. If you ask the external student, they would say they hated their professor and they weren't wearing their lucky shirt. So on the next exam, what would you see? You would most likely see that that internal student studied harder and received a better score. That external student would have just worn their lucky shirt and not seen a change in their grade. And studies reflect this. Studies show that locus of control is the single most important factor in determining academic achievement and success, even when IQ is controlled for. So since the 50s, hundreds of thousands of experiments have been conducted about this concept, and academic achievement is just one of the things that they studied. Overall, being internal helps in many areas of life, and academic achievement is just one of them. So my first example is elite athletes, and I'm just going to be mentioning my favorite studies, but you can go look and find some more of your own. So elite athletes are significantly more likely to be internal, and Muhammad Ali is my favorite example. He has quotes that go, "I am the greatest. I said that before I knew I was." He also says, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now, and live the rest of your life as a champion." Great internal phrasing. 2, drug and alcohol addiction is significantly less common amongst internals. Why? Because they're less likely to be coerced. 2 is bullying. Internal students are less likely to face bullying. So as an internal student, if a bully came up to me and said, "Oh, I hate your shoes. What are those?" I would say, "These are my Crocs, and I like them." Lastly, dialysis patients are significantly more likely to adhere to treatment because if they're internal. Why? Because they believe what they do will impact their health. So if they follow treatment, they'll see better health outcomes. So after reading these papers and hundreds of others of papers, I think there was something missing. I couldn't find something. Why wasn't anyone trying to make people think more internally or just change locus of control? So I looked for more studies. I couldn't find anything. But I thought, if someone could find an intervention, if someone could change locus of control, this would open up a whole new realm of locus of control research. So funny enough, I was taking a psych methods class and I had to pick an experiment to study that semester. I had some time. I thought, oh, why not? So I talked to my group and we decided to see if we could change locus of control in a short period of time, 4 minutes to be exact. Why 4 minutes? Because shorter interventions are easier to implement. And that's what we wanted. If this were to work, we wanted it to be implemented.
So 2 things over here. Number 1, she's talking about, getting autonomy. And we were talking about motivation, having autonomy as one of the components. So when you actually feel like you can actually make a change, then you have a fluid mindset and you have a growth mindset, and you can actually adapt to circumstances and so on because you feel like you can do something about it. And you're not going to be stuck with whatever it is that happened in the past or whatever, or like you don't feel like I can't do this or that and stuff when you actually can, right? So there's a difference. So this is her mentioning about sort of like the fixed mindset versus the fluid mindset or the growth mindset. But number 2 also, what I am going to put like some commentary on is that we need to figure out, in these conversations, we need to kind of like be clear on what do we have control over, and that is the step 0 that we've been talking about. Is it realistic, right? Do we have control over something or not? And if we do have control over something, we can have control over something, then we should focus on that, right? And we can actually adjust things and so on. What we don't have control over, we need to be realistic about that and accept that we don't have control over that. So this is sort of like what you should just keep in mind as you're continuing watching this. And the second thing she mentioned is the idea of like a short intervention, right? And so this is something you take short steps, but you take them small steps, but you take them consistently. So you don't want to overwhelm yourself. You want to start off with one thing at a time, kind of get used to that and stuff, and add something else on top of that and so on. So small interventions, small doses and stuff can be really effective.
So what did we do? We had a pretest that measured locus of control, and then we had our intervention video that was only 4 minutes long, and then we had a post-test that measured what happened to locus of control afterwards. So the intervention was a valence video, and valence means charge. So charge with positive language and imagery or negative language and imagery. So our positive video was a workout motivation video. People were waking up early to go to the gym, they were climbing up mountains, lifting up heavy weights. And the external video was negative. It was about climate change and how nothing could be done to change the climate. People were crying, floods were washing away homes, and politicians weren't able to come up with a consensus on what to do. So we hypothesized that after watching the positive video, our participants on average would become more internal and realize they did have control over their lives. And after watching the negative video, they would become more external, realizing that there were some things that were out of their control. So what do we find? I'll show you with some of the data with this table. So on our y-axis, we see locus of control score. So the higher the score, the more external, the lower the score, more internal. On our x-axis, we see which participant group they were in. They either watched a positive video or the negative video. So this blue bar shows our pre-test for locus of control before they watched the positive video. In our post-test, we see that scores became statistically significantly more internal after watching the positive video. This blue bar shows what our locus of control scores were before watching the negative video. And those participants became more external, but this wasn't statistically significant.
So you can see the change in the positive.
So overall, the good news is it's pretty easy to think more internally. but it's more challenging to think externally. So why am I here today? Why are you here today? Why do I need your help? So we have to change our locus of control. We know that by just the way we're thinking, that's going to impact our outcomes. So it would be my dream to implement an intervention in workplaces, in schools, in hospitals, but intervention is very difficult without community support. So I thought we would implement some ideas amongst ourselves. So I've come up with some ideas through my research to help you think and act more internally, but you can apply these to other areas of your life, of course. So the first one is parenting. I'm not a parent, so I don't want to tell parents what to do, but we can all change the way we interact with kids. This is important because locus of control is learned. So we want to teach kids the thought process of being internal while they're young. So if your child did really well, don't tell your son, oh, you're so smart, I'm so proud of you. Tell them, you're so hardworking, I'm so proud of you. Why? Because being smart is out of a child's control, but being hardworking isn't. Being hardworking shows that what you do impacts your outcome, and that's exactly how an internal thinks. Also, if your child wants to try something new, encourage them, motivate them, don't tear them down. Make them think that they can do anything they set their minds to as long as they put in the effort. Health. So when trying to achieve a new fitness goal, it's important to believe in yourself. Now, I believe in setting attainable goals, but if you know you can't do something, don't do it. If I wanted you to do a backflip right now, that would be a very bad idea because I had scoliosis surgery as a kid. You would have to take me to the hospital across the street. No. But I know I could run a 10K. So if my goal was to run an 8-minute mile or run a 10-minute mile, but I didn't think I could even run a 15-minute mile, then I wouldn't run at all and I wouldn't reach anywhere close to my goal. Number 2, if you or someone you know has been diagnosed with an illness, it's important to try and believe that your treatment will work. So consult your healthcare providers, come up with a treatment plan, and most importantly, practice it and also believe it'll work. So the placebo effect kind of comes into this. So the placebo effect is really interesting to me. If a lot of times medications work just as well as placebos, drugs that are just sugar pills, they don't really do anything. Depression medications have been shown to work just as well as placebos and even activate the same regions of the brain as SSRIs. So it's important to just believe that something will work. It might actually work for you. So lastly, our environment. So it's important to make sure that you encourage others who are going through a difficult time. Empower them, motivate them, create a positive environment. Why? Because our environment really impacts our perceptions. If you surround yourself with external people who blame others, who victimize themselves, and don't take responsibility for their actions, it's going to be harder to remain as internal as you could be. Lastly, try and change your perceptions and realize that there's some things that you could actually change just by the way that you're thinking. So for example, if you have a situation and you need to realize that you actually didn't do so well, think, could I have done something differently? Change your perceptions. Really be self-actualized. So overall, I want you to take a few messages with you. Surround yourself with positivity and encouragement. Also, be more self-aware. Just know that how you perceive your situations matter. If you need help thinking more internally, just know it may only take 4 minutes. So, let's share more inspiring stories. Let's empower others and ourselves, because ultimately, you can change your life just by changing the way you're perceiving it. Thank you.
I hope that made sense, and I hope that it puts things into perspectives. Speaking of changing perspectives, and I hope that the concept of perception really has it has a really good that has a really powerful impact on you whenever it is that you're navigating whatever it is that you navigate. A lot of times we have certain rules in our mind and how reality should work, or like how things are going to work, and we sort of fixate on them, even though in reality there are other possibilities that could happen as well, right? And possibilities meaning like a lot of possibilities that are high probability, right? But we sort of just go with one of them, and we just want to simplify things, so we just assume with one of them and just go forward like that. And I understand where that's coming from, but sometimes it can have a huge impact in a negative way. So if you're finding yourself where things are not going the way that you thought they're gonna go, then instead of blaming the things and stuff like that, you should sort of like also consider taking a step back and saying, maybe I'm not considering all the possibilities and stuff. Let me go back and reevaluate that, right? Maybe in this particular context, this particular perception that I had of how reality should be or how things should be working and stuff may not actually be matching with this context. So how do I customize it? How do I go back and actually find something that's relevant or related to that particular context I'm in, right? So how do I go back and change my assumption here to match with whatever my reality is? So with that, I don't think we have time to go into this, so we'll go ahead and do that next time, inshallah. But in the meantime, let me actually cut that out. And we'll just kind of like move this here. But yeah, so if there's if if you have any comments or thoughts on this, let me know, inshallah. Any ideas on, yeah, any reflections, any comments, any thoughts, let me know. And if not, then no problem. We're going to go ahead and continue next time, inshallah. And I'm hoping that you're constantly evaluating this, that, you know, every time I put this here, it's sort of like priming you to look for answers for this. So I'm hoping that you're getting some of these answers now.
Could you go back to the slide with the videos?
Yes.
I just wanted to screenshot it so I could send it to someone.
Okay. You can also like reach out to me, and I could share the slides with you sometimes if you want.
Okay, if I have trouble getting to the video, I'll do that, inshallah.
Sounds good, inshallah. Okay, so homework is to go and explore these things deeper and to try to make connections, try to see how you can, you know, implement this in your life, see if you can, you know, kind of align yourselves, your locus of control, your perspectives and so on, to match with the reality more and more. And for us, alhamdulillah, we have Islam that kind of gives us those like clear perspectives, and kind of boundaries and stuff, and kind of the capital T truths. So it helps us a lot. It kind of fast tracks us. Many people don't know about Islam much, and so they get you know, thrown off. And also living in a context that has been sort of like reset essentially, and sort of we're starting from scratch. We can see like a lot of these things can impact us now, but you know, it's if things are going to continue like this, then it might continue impacting us even more as we move forward, because we're sort of removing the, you know, the wisdoms of other societies, for example, that people have accumulated over, you know, centuries of experience and so on, or like, you know, hundreds of years. But also they remove that concept of right and wrong, morality and stuff, you know, that we have in Islam. This is fixed morality, it's not relative morality. In this case, in a situation where you sort of go back and just sort of start from scratch, you're not able to find objective morality. And if you don't have objective morality, you cannot figure out what's good and bad. You can't figure out what's right and wrong. And as a consequence, everyone sort of is right. You know, you have to assume that everyone is right, everyone is, you know, correct and so on. And as a consequence, then you can have a lot of problems happen when in reality, somebody was actually wrong and so on. So in the next few years, as you gotta, you know, navigate different, you know, circumstances, as things are changing and stuff, and people are questioning certain things that were for all the time, for like, you know, for hundreds or thousands of years, have stayed the same. Now they're being questioned and sort of like, you know, reset. Then we are sort of going backwards in time essentially, while we're thinking we're actually progressing. So just something to keep in mind and sort of prepare for as we move forward, inshallah. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Preparation means that you're you know, you're sort of like expecting this trend to carry out like this, and so you're already prepared and, you know, kind of moving forward with those preparations and stuff that are going to help you navigate that, like that future, inshallah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.